Breaking news: a major incident in the Strait of Hormuz. Tanker traffic suspended. Oil futures surging 7% in the first 12 minutes of trading. Tokyo markets down. London markets down. Fuel prices ticking upward at pumps across 3 continents in real time. Now, imagine that's not a hypothetical. Imagine you're watching it happen. The crawl at the bottom of the screen, the breathless reporters, the emergency meetings being called on 3 continents simultaneously. All of it because of one stretch of water, 21 miles wide. This is the Strait of Hormuz. And the fragility of that scenario is more real than most people ever stop to consider. Right now, somewhere in that narrow channel, a supertanker the length of 4 football fields is pushing through the waves. Behind it, another. Behind that, another. An unbroken procession, moving around the clock every day of the year, carrying roughly 1/5 of the world's entire oil supply through a corridor where the usable shipping lane is just 2 miles wide in each direction. 2 miles. The margin for error is almost nothing. If that strait closes, even briefly, even partially, the shockwave doesn't take weeks to arrive. It takes hours. So here is the question that the world's most serious engineers and strategists have been asking quietly for decades. What if we just built a way around it? What if you could carve a brand new shipping canal straight through the mountains of the Arabian Peninsula and make the Strait of Hormuz irrelevant overnight? That is not science fiction. That is a real engineering proposal. And today we're going to find out exactly what it would take and whether it would actually work. To understand why this idea even exists, you have to understand what the Strait of Hormuz actually does for the world. The Arabian Gulf sits like a long inland sea, surrounded by some of the most oil-rich territory ever found on this planet. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar, Iran. Together they hold more than half of the world's proven oil reserves and enormous quantities of natural gas. And that entire region has exactly one exit to the open ocean. One door, the Strait of Hormuz, barely 21 miles wide at its narrowest, pinched between Iran's coastline to the north and the jagged tip of Oman's Musandam Peninsula to the south. Through that door, between 17 and 20 million barrels of oil move every single day. Japan imports around 90% of its oil through this passage. South Korea, around 80%. China, India, every major Asian economy. All of them running on energy that squeezes through this one corridor. And here is the geography that makes it so exposed. Iran's coast and islands sit directly above the shipping lanes. Not nearby, directly above. This proximity has driven up insurance premiums, complicated shipping routes, and made the region one of the most closely watched stretches of ocean on Earth. The vulnerability is not theoretical. It is drawn into the map itself. Now, the world has not been completely passive about this problem. There are already pipelines designed to bypass the strait, and they matter. Because they also reveal exactly why a canal was ever taken seriously. Saudi Arabia built the Petroline, nearly 1,000 miles of pipeline crossing the width of the Arabian Peninsula to the Red Sea. The UAE constructed a line that terminates at the port of Fujairah, just outside the strait on the Gulf of Oman side. Iraq once had pipelines running north toward the Mediterranean. The infrastructure exists. The problem is what it can actually carry. At full capacity, these pipelines combined handle perhaps 8 million barrels per day. The strait moves up to 20 million. That gap, 12 million barrels with nowhere else to go, is why pipelines alone have never solved the problem. And then there is what pipelines simply cannot carry at all: They move oil. They do not move the tankers that carry liquefied natural gas. They do not move container ships. They do not move the growing variety of cargo that increasingly transits the Gulf. For anyone serious about truly removing the world's dependence on this choke point, pipelines are a useful patch. They are not a solution, which is what makes the next idea so radical and so worth taking seriously. Find the Musandam Peninsula on a map. It is that small detached finger of Omani territory that juts northward into the strait like a stone wedge. Now draw a line straight through it. From the Arabian Gulf on the west side, cutting through the mountains and opening into the Gulf of Oman on the east. That line is the canal, a new shipping lane that would allow supertankers to load their cargo at Gulf terminals, sail straight through Musandam, and emerge directly into the open Arabian Sea, never once entering the contested waters of the strait. The idea is elegant. What it would require is almost beyond imagining. The Musandam Peninsula is not a gentle coastal plain. It is one of the most dramatic and inaccessible stretches of terrain in the entire Arabian Peninsula. Sheer limestone cliffs that drop straight into the sea, peaks rising over 6,000 feet, valleys so steep and narrow that some villages along this coast have historically been reachable only by boat. There are no roads through much of it, no railway. Created in engineering terms, you are starting from nothing. A canal, wide enough and deep enough for the largest supertankers on Earth, very large crude carriers, over 1,000 feet long, requiring a draft of around 70 feet, would mean blasting through billions of cubic meters of solid mountain limestone. The original Suez Canal moved around 74 million cubic meters of material through desert sand. The Musandam Canal would require orders of magnitude more through rock that is exponentially harder to move. Cost estimates have historically ranged from several hundred billion to well over $1 trillion. The timeline, if the political will and funding ever materialized, would be measured in decades. And the canal is only the starting point. You would also need port infrastructure at both ends, access roads carved through the mountains, worker facilities, tidal management systems, and a permanent security apparatus around what would immediately become the single most strategically important piece of infrastructure on Earth. The Panama Canal expansion. Through far gentler terrain, along an already existing route, took a decade and cost around $5.5 billion. The Musandam Canal would make that look like a weekend project. And here is the part that most enthusiastic discussions of this project quietly skip over. Even if you built it, even if you spent the $1 trillion, moved the mountains, managed the environmental fallout, the Arabian Gulf's coral reefs, its shallow ecosystems, its wildlife, and opened a gleaming new canal through Musandam, would the world actually be less exposed? The uncomfortable answer is not as much as you would think. The Musandam Peninsula belongs to Oman, a sovereign nation. Any canal running through it would be subject to Omani law, Omani politics, and Omani relationships with every other power in the region. A canal can be blocked by a single vessel run aground or closed by a single government decision. An open sea strait is far harder to shut. You have not eliminated a choke point. You have built a new one, narrower, and entirely in the hands of one country. And geographically, the deeper problem remains untouched. Tankers using this canal still have to load their cargo at terminals inside the Arabian Gulf. They are still operating in the same waters, surrounded by the same nations, shaped by the same economic and geographic pressures that made the strait a concern in the first place. The canal moves the exit point. It does not move the Gulf itself. You have relocated the vulnerability. You have not cured it. And yet, the fact that this proposal has been seriously studied for decades tells you something worth sitting with. It tells you that the modern global economy has built itself on a foundation so geographically concentrated, so physically narrow, that carving a canal through a mountain range has been considered a credible response. That literally moving mountains has felt to some of the world's most serious planners more achievable than reducing the world's dependence on what flows through this one corridor. Geography cannot be fully engineered away. Every bypass creates a new bottleneck. The Strait of Hormuz matters not just because of how narrow it is, 21 miles, but because of everything surrounding it. The resources, the wealth, the sheer concentration of global energy in one corner of the map. You can build a canal. You cannot build a way around that. The strait is still open. The tankers are still moving. And the conversation around energy, geography, and global trade is only getting more urgent, not less. Subscribe if you want to be here the next time we pull one of these apart.